Thank you, Senator. Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I would like to raise the issue of James Price Point in the Kimberley, and also its relationship to the conversation that we've been having in this place over the last week, and that is about science. It is Science Week this week, where we have a lot of scientists in the building talking to us about their various areas of expertise, and also raising issues about investment in science and the importance of science. Unfortunately, my group of scientists who were coming to brief me yesterday, I couldn't meet with them because I was in this very chamber talking about the super trawler and, in fact, science. My office very gladly met with them and have shared some of their information with me, so I would have liked to officially apologise for not being able to meet with them. But I think it was a very good example of the fact that where I was in this chamber talking about science and the importance of science to that particular debate, but also about scientific uncertainty over some of the decisions that we are making, and also I believe it's a good example of how we simply didn't know enough to support some of the decision-making on that particular issue, as I think has been clearly demonstrated during the debate. And I want to relate this back to the current process that's going on in the Kimberley and at James Price Point, because a lot of the science in this debate is also very important. And I go first to the work around the environmental impact assessment, and the company has done and says it must be, their assessment process must be good. They've spent $80 million on that, therefore it must be good. But I'll point you to some of the work that's been done by the cetacean research cetacean research from Murdoch University, where they, and from the Cetacean Research Unit, the Centre for Fish, Fisheries and Aquatic Ecosystem Research, which is the School of Biological Science and Biotechnology at Murdoch Uni in Western Australia, and point you to, the chamber to the work that they have done in looking at just the marine side of the environmental impact assessment process that Woodside have undertaken, and where they clearly point out the failures of the science in that report. So they talk about, relatively simple things like the poor survey work that's been done and not using the latest approach. The fact that the simple fact of the fact that the numbers of humpback whales using that area have been significantly undercounted. The fact that they make simplistic responses that aren't backed up by research or science. In particular, for example, the point they make about the document makes reference to the fact that, well, this project won't impact on dolphins, on bottlenose or spinner dolphins, because given that these species are widespread, highly mobile and are likely to exhibit behavioural and avoidance responses such as fast flight responses, faster dive times and high speed swimming. It goes on in that vein. The point that the research paper from the Murdoch scientists points out is that what they say is the first statement above, for example, implies that development will result in the flight of bottlenose and spinner dolphins. Being able to exhibit avoidance responses does not equate to a species not being impacted at a population level. And it also talks about the fact that they don't point out which species they're talking about, and in particular, there's an assumption they're talking about one species. In fact, there's of course more species up there, and in particular, all their work just didn't identify the fact that there's the miniature spinner dolphins up there at all. They also talk about inappropriate surveys of approach and methodology for dugongs, and they talk extensively about impacts on dolphins as well. The point there being is that it's clear that that work has not been done adequately. The research unit has also expressed concerns about the lack of independence for environmental impact assessment and peer review. Then we go into the issues around the dinosaur footprints, and Dr Salisbury pointing out, who's done an extensive amount of work on the dinosaur footprints, some of which has been recently released, and I understand there's more to come, but points out his work points out just how important this particular area is in terms of dinosaurs, that it has been under-documented and it hasn't been properly assessed, and again the science work there hasn't been done properly. And he points out that there's been no dedicated funding to complete the survey of the footprints. One of the other areas of failures up there, of course, is their failure to adequately document the existence of bilbies, and it took the Community Science Project to find these bilbies. Which brings me to the point about what's one of the exciting things in the Kimberley, particularly with the James Price Point development, but in broader Australia too, the growing willingness for the community to take on board community science, and the way that community science is happening all around Australia, and in particular being taken on in the Kimberley. And when we talk about community science, we're talking about members of the community volunteering their time to work with scientists to do proper monitoring so that it can be appropriately taken into databases and used as evidence on particular points. So they are carrying out very important research science. And in the Kimberley, for example, it's the community that have been doing the monitoring on bilbies. It's the community doing their daily monitoring of whale movements off the coast of the Kimberley and off the coast of James Price Point. In fact, as I articulated in this place not long ago, even in the first 4 weeks of the community survey being undertaken this season, the community scientists have clearly demonstrated the failure of Woodside and in terms of accurately documenting the number of humpback whales that are migrating along that coast, but also using the fact that that area of the Kimberley coast is so important as a whale nursery. And of course the EIA, as I mentioned, downplays the numbers of whales that are using that area and completely fails to highlight the importance of that particular area for humpback whales and as a humpback nursery. So the community science is clearly documenting those numbers, and they're updating a website on those numbers very regularly, and are using a very scientifically rigorous method for that. Other areas that the community science are working on in the Kimberley are documenting turtle movements and turtle uses of beaches, and in particular nesting on that particular coast. They're also monitoring things like seagrass. Trying to demonstrate here is that there's a dedicated group of very passionate and professional people who are giving up their time and resources to help demonstrate the gaps in the science that have been commissioned by Woodside in their strategic assessment. We believe, or I believe, that there are some very important issues that need to be highlighted here, and that is the failure of Woodside and the strategic assessment to give an accurate picture of this area. They have failed to carry out adequate studies. They have conveniently left out the importance of this area. Their studies, the limited studies they have carried out, have not been adequately peer-reviewed. And one of the issues here is that it's because it's come from the developer rather than them being independent. So, of course, wherever a developer is presenting this information, they're going to be presenting their information in the best possible light. So how do we get a more rigorous environmental impact assessment process that adequately looks at the issues, that can be peer-reviewed and is worthy of really presenting the facts about a particular development? And that goes, of course, it's not just the James Price Point development here, it goes to fishing, mining, agriculture. And so there is a lot of concern in the scientific community about the independence of the environmental impact assessment process. Those comments have been made over a number of years, in fact, the period of time that I've been involved in advocacy in protection of the environment, for example. These have been ongoing concerns. And there continue to be concerns, and the Woodside development at James Price Point really clearly highlights this fact, highlights the fact that there does need to be independent sources of funding, but if developers are commissioning science, it should, and funding, sorry, should I say, science, then that funding needs to be put into an independent fund, and there's independent decisions made about the science and about the research that is undertaken. If that had happened at James Price Point, if there was a process of independently commissioning the science to be carried out of that proposed development, we would have got much more rigorous science, we would have got a much better and deeper understanding of the importance of the marine environment, as is highlighted by the Murdoch University's Centre for Fish, Fisheries and Aquatic Ecosystem Research, with their paper that comments specifically on the marine impacts of James Price Point. We also, of course, would have a much better understanding of the importance of the area in terms of the dinosaur footprints, its interaction, the interaction with the dinosaurs in that landscape, and the fact that there's emerging evidence now that shows that dinosaurs helped form that landscape. One of, if not the only place in the world where dinosaurs have so significantly impacted and developed a landscape. And of course the other important connection there is also the relationship between the dinosaur footprints and the Aboriginal culture that has woven those footprints into its culture. Again, the importance those trackways play in the interaction with songways. Now, again, this is one of the only places in the world, if not the only place in the world, where that interaction occurs. That has not been adequately documented. Of course, there are some issues there that are specifically cannot be related because it is cultural business, but I have heard, and the community has shared some of the stories with me that they are able to share, and it shows the richness of the culture, the richness of the custodianship of that area, the richness of the interaction between the culture and the dinosaur footprints. As I said, one of the only places in the world, hasn't been adequately documented, and the extent of the trackways we are only now getting an understanding of, and it's not thanks to Woodside, I must say. I'll come back to linking this back to the importance of making sure that we value and fund good science in this country. Of course, there will always be questions. There's never absolute certainty over something, but the more that we get a scientific understanding of these issues, the better. The more that we get an evaluation of particular areas, the better. The more monitoring we undertake to inform our decision-making, the better. Federal funding to scientific research and innovation is almost $9 billion in 2012-13, and federal funding to health and medical research is $760.5 million in the last budget. Unfortunately, we're now hearing stories that haven't been categorically ruled out in certain areas of about deferrals, freezing, pausing of grants from the ARC, from the NH and MRC and other scientific and other science grants because of the surplus to the budget. Our argument, and my argument, is very strongly that unless we are investing as a nation in research and innovation and valuing science, we actually lose out as a nation. We won't. Our productivity, for example, won't continue to grow. Our understanding of our ecosystems and what we need to understand about them to ensure that their protection, our understanding of sustainability and in agriculture, for example, with the impact of climate change, agriculture is having to adapt very, very quickly, and Australian farmers are very good at adapting, but they've come to the extent of their ability to adapt without better understandings and without more scientific research being done around how to sustainably manage our landscapes in a changing climate. That is going to be dependent on science. The arguments at James Price Point are, we believe, very strong in that this development should not be located in this area. It has poor economic, environmental and social outcomes for that area. We need to be looking at alternative sites And we need to be valuing the role of science in this decision-making, because it has been lacking. There has been no scientific peer review of the approach that Woodside is taking. We need to be looking into that more strongly. We need to be independently funding this type of research so that we have an independent understanding of the impacts of these developments.
Thank you, Senator